Okay, so we're going to end today and I guess, Tuesday of week 3 by talking about nutrients. So we got several things that we're going to go through over these next several slides, but related more to nutrients and metabolic rate, that sort of thing. So to start off, calories. We hear about calories all the time. We hear about cutting calories, watching calories, measuring calories, that sort of thing. Well, calories are just a measurement of energy, of how much energy is contained in food. Okay, so by definition, 1 calorie is the amount of energy required to increase the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And it's actually even a little more specific. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's like basically to increase water from 12.5 to 13.5 degrees. But still, it's really specific. However, we actually don't really ever talk about single calories. We talk about kilocalories. Okay, so when we say that, like, let's say a can of soda has 150 calories, what we're actually saying is it has 150 kilocalories. It just makes things, I think, a little bit easier. Probably wouldn't be as overwhelming, too, if you say, hey, that's got 150,000 calories in it. And so what calories do on these nutrition labels is it just gives us an idea of how much energy is in our food. Okay, so you'll find that some things have a lot of energy. They're packed full of energy. And then some things have relatively small amounts of energy. Now, the amount of energy in a given food depends on what it's made up of. Okay, fats, proteins, and carbs all have different amounts of energy in them, I guess, or amounts of stored energy. And so, to give you an idea, 1 gram of fat equals 9 kilocalories. So, in other words, if you have a pound of fat, that's 3,500 calories, 3,500 kilocalories that you've got there. All right. 1 gram of alcohol has 7 calories in it. Okay, I'm just going to go to calories as opposed to kilocalories. All right, so there's more, not quite as much as fat, but we're going to see here that there's more calories in alcohol than there is in carbs. But apparently the reason that alcohol can be dangerous with regards to weight gain, dangerous is probably the right word, or wrong word, maybe detrimental to weight gain, weight loss, is because, I guess, when people drink, they put a lot of stuff, or they can put mixers in them. Okay, and those mixers are generally sweet and sugary and have lots of calories in them themselves. So this leads us to carbs and proteins, and both carbs and proteins have 4 calories per gram. Okay, so we can get more energy out of fat than we can out of carbs and proteins. And as we go through, as we talked about last time, last week, there are times where we use fat, we rely on fat, and there are times where we rely on carbs. So this leads to something called our basal metabolic rate. And we will talk a little bit more about this later in the semester. But metabolic rate is just how fast is your body using energy, or the rate of energy use. When it comes to basal metabolic rate, it's a very specific definition. So if someone had been sleeping for 8 hours and then were laying supine, how much energy would they need to survive? It's a very strange thing, right? But that's basal metabolic rate. All right. Now, everybody's BMR is different. And so it depends on, well, how much fat-free mass do you have as opposed to fat mass? If the leaner you are, the more calories you will burn at rest. Your body surface area affects this, because if you have a high body surface area, that's more places or more area where you can dissipate heat. You lose more heat, you're using more calories. Age, unfortunately, makes things a little more difficult, as I'm finding out. The older you are, the fewer calories that you burn. And so that's one of the downsides of getting older. Core temperature. Okay, core temperature or temperature increases the speed of reactions. And so if it's a higher temperature, more reactions are used. If more reactions, you're going to require more energy. So there's that. And then stress. If you're in a stressful situation, you're actually going to have a higher metabolic rate, which will cause you to burn more calories. And so, hey, there's an unintended consequence, or maybe it was intended, I doubt it, of finals. Now, with basal metabolic rate, it's that really weird 8 hours of sleep in the supine position. And what do you need to survive? Resting metabolic rate is one we really use. It's usually pretty close to basal metabolic rate, but it's basically how much energy are you using while you're existing and not doing a whole lot. Okay, generally larger than BMR. And a typical adult has a resting metabolic rate between 1,200 and 2,400 calories. Okay, but if we go throughout the course of a day, average use is 1,800 to 3,000 calories. Now, depending on the type of athlete, some athletes can exceed 10,000 calories. Now, example of this, I've got two. One, when I was a kid, when I was 18, 19, I took a nutrition class. And one of the requirements of my nutrition class was to, for 3 days, count calories. And we put it into this cool program, and it said, hey, over 3 days, you've eaten this many calories, or you've consumed this many calories. And then we also had to put in, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, like kind of an activity log. Well, in those 3 days, I consumed over 13 or 14,000 calories, which is about 4,500 a day. And I was losing weight at the time. All I did apparently was eat, go to school. This was in the summer, and ride my bike or run. Like the only time I was sitting was when I was in class. All right. And so 4,500 calories, losing weight, that is the dream. But some athletes, like it says here, 10,000 calories. That is a lot of food. That takes some serious effort. You see, like football players, I kind of joke that, especially offensive linemen, they go one of two ways when they retire. They either get bigger because they're not doing as much, or they actually lose a lot of weight. Jeff Saturday, the center for the Indianapolis Colts, or former center, like when Peyton was here and they were losing to the Patriots all the time, he retired and he lost a ton of weight. And part of the reason that many of these guys lose weight is because they just don't have to eat as much. Okay, whereas some of those guys still continue to eat that much, but they're not using the energy. All right, but a lot of these offensive linemen, as soon as they retire, weight just falls off of them because they don't consume as much as they used to. Now, when it comes to diets and weight loss and that sort of thing, there are all sorts of, I don't want to call them fads, but that's kind of what they are, or just different methods is probably a better way to do it. Ultimately, what it comes down to is the CICO method. Now, this is an oversimplification, I will admit, but it's still, the concept is pretty accurate. It's calories in versus calories out. Your energy balance is the balance of calories consumed through eating and drinking compared to what you're burning through physical activity. Okay, so what you take in is energy in, what you use to do whatever it is you do is energy out. So just by existing, you're going to burn calories, right? You take a breath in, that's the result of your diaphragm contracting. That requires energy. Okay, so even when you're sitting in class or watching this video, you are burning calories. Okay, but we burn calories in everything that we do. If we're not burning calories, I would make the argument that we're dead. So hopefully that's not the case. But like I said, this is a basic concept, but it does apply. Now, it doesn't account for the type of calories. Certain foods will cause you to hold on to water or get rid of water, and we'll get into that a little bit here. I saw a great thing on Twitter, of all places, the other day. So somebody, I believe it was somebody that I follow, had all of the different diets that they could think of that are out there. And it, like the keto diet and the Atkins diet and the South Beach diet, and I don't know the names of all of them. Okay, but basically, what this person did very simply is like, the Atkins diet. You get rid of carbs. Why are you getting rid of carbs? So you decrease your caloric intake. Therefore, you're trying to put yourself in a caloric deficit. Okay, so the goal of all these diets is ultimately to have you take in less calories than you burn. That's the concept, because if you're taking in more than you're using, you're going to gain weight. All right. The methodology and the way that it happens is different, and it can affect people differently. Okay. So maintaining your weight in a healthy range requires a balance between what you take in and what you get rid of. So to lose weight, if you're balanced, you're going to maintain. If you want to gain weight, take more in. That's the easy one to do generally. If you want to get rid of weight, take fewer calories in. This takes time, though. It's not something that will happen in a day, a month, a week, a year. Okay? You're trying to balance this out over time. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, just look at our country. Okay, one of my friends when I was in Oregon, one of my friends from Oregon, he now lives in Seattle. He actually lives on one of those islands that you'll see, like the ferry boats. In Grey's Anatomy, he lives on one of those islands now. Apparently has a gorgeous house. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and I was talking to him one day, and he goes, one of the great things about being an orthopedic surgeon is I have job security. No matter what happens, I will have a job because this country is in this pandemic. And not the COVID pandemic, but the obesity pandemic is what he called it, or epidemic, I think is actually what he called it. And because of that, people's knees are always going to be failing, and so he's going to get to put in artificial knees all the time, and hips and stuff like that. All right, because so many people are overweight, and there are issues that come along with that. And not just the orthopedic injuries, but you've got diabetes, you've got atherosclerosis, all sorts of things, heart disease. Okay? So, when it comes to maintaining a healthy weight, it's different for everybody because we're not all the same. We have different activity levels, different body composition, male versus female, how old we are, height, weight, activity level. Like I said, I think I mentioned that twice, but it's really variable. Okay? And so, like we said, the caloric requirement just to function is different for every person. And so, if you're trying to maintain, you want to bring as many in as you are getting rid of. One of the things to account for that's kind of interesting is this topic of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Okay, and what that is we spend energy on doing things that aren't active. So when you're asleep, you're burning energy. When you're eating, you're burning energy. When you're and exercising, right? And so those things I think make sense, but then there are other things that you do throughout the day that you're not thinking about that burn energy. And depending on who it is and what they do, they can burn a lot of calories. All right, so just some simple examples: walking to work, doing the garden, or working in the garden, fidgeting. All right, staring at the ceiling, being in your chair, spinning around in circles. All those things burn energy. And so depending on what you do or what a person does, they can actually burn a lot of calories that way. And so that's where we're going to end on for the first day of week 3.